I was in my seat. Everybody knew what was going down. Somebody wanted to be a rock, but I thought it wasn't a rock. He wanted to be a rock lobster. The lobster. The lobster. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Today on this podcast is for Nerds Media Club. We are discussing The Lobster.
Oh my God, I think that is the best intro in this show's history. I'm so happy about that.
I was driving home and I thought to myself, The Lobster, like it's still just such a wild, it was a wild ride. And honestly, I don't understand a lot, but I have a lot of things, awesome things to say about it, and a lot of like questions, and I'm really stoked to like get into this one.
Yeah, this is going to be a good conversation. So welcome everyone to this podcast is for nerds. Every 2 weeks we do a media club where one of us recommends something. So 2 weeks ago I recommended we watch the Yorgos Lanthimos, the absurdist dark comedy, The Lobster. And it stars Colin Farrell, Rachel Weisz, and Olivia Colman. Before we get into it, what did you think of it, Zach?
What did I think of it? Okay. First of all, I personally thought that if there's for any reason, at any given point in time, there are any directors out there who just want to cast someone who can look bored through the entire movie and just not make any facial expressions, I'm your boy. Because Colin Farrell is back, or was back, because this came out in 2015. And I think the part of it that was like, it's written, like you said, as an absurdist comedy. And if you're not paying attention, you can get like distracted from the fact that it's supposed to be funny. Because there's a lot of funny moments in here just based on like how it's just wild is the best way I'm going to put that.
Yeah, and this is definitely the director's style, and he's worked with Colin Farrell a few times, and he's definitely reignited my love for him.
My favorite person, actually, who's in this, and I didn't know she was in it until I watched the movie. I'm probably going to like butcher her name, is Léa Seydoux.
Oh yeah, she's amazing.
Jesus, like her as a human, I fell in love with her. Honestly, Death Stranding.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was gonna say that's kind of her big thing right now. She was just in the Death Stranding video game.
Yeah, and I honestly, my second choice for starting off this podcast was to let you all know we have watched The Lobster, and our hearts are fragile, but not that fragile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was well done.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed this. There were multiple moments where I just kind of stopped. And I watched it with my wife, and we were just like, what the hell is going on?
Oh, I'm so glad you watched it with her.
And we were both like, wait a minute, it's only been an hour. And that's the setup. That was the setup for the whole actual movie.
Yeah.
Like, this scene. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, so we've got, if you watch the video
high school
version,
right
yeah,
here.
Me too. If you watch the video version of the podcast, we've got some clips from the movie going. I'm going to give a really quick description of the movie without spoiling what the focus of the movie is, and then we'll get into spoilers. So The Lobster, it's the third film that was directed, written, and produced by the Greek filmmaker Yorgos Lanthimos. It's an absurdist dark comedy. It stars Colin Farrell as David, a man visiting a hotel centered on finding lovers after his wife cheats on him. If the residents of this hotel do not find a partner within a certain amount of time, they are turned into the animal of their choice. And the film has cast support from Rachel Weisz, I mentioned earlier, Olivia Colman, John C. Reilly, who's wonderful in this, Leia Sadu, and then Ben Whishaw from, most people probably know him from like the Paddington movies and the 007 movies. So if you had to rate this out of 5, Zach, what would you give it?
I'm gonna give it a 4.7 out of 5, and the 0.3 I'm knocking off really just comes down to the ambiguity at the end.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll definitely get into the ending and kind of theories on what happens at the end, because it's not entirely explicit, but there are theories that you can pull from it.
I had a couple like theories. I didn't read on anything, but I was kind of thinking about it, and just like how the narration is set up and the point to when the narration stops. I think that's when it also kind of made me go, okay, when does that particular part take over, and when are we caught up to speed versus what we're being told in the story? So that's why I was like, okay, interesting. Like this is, I have a lot of questions.
Would you recommend this movie to anybody?
I recommend it to, like for this scene in particular, I wouldn't recommend this to everybody. Yeah. But I would recommend it to people. It's definitely borders on like, you know, the part that actually tripped me out was the fact that I thought that the hotel and the loners were all just one section of society, but in reality, this whole society operates on a system where you can't be in certain places if you are not with someone. Yeah. And I thought that was insane. Like the way this movie balances out, like the seemingly serene and scenic and like almost innocent, like even with the color palette and the schemes in the background versus like the sinister undertones, really get the strong vibes of like Parasite here. Like even how like even how like the music is calm, and it's with string instruments, and they start off with a very serene and balanced theme, but then they start to get a little more distorted and cross over and have off-tempo sounds as they start moving around to kind of accentuate when things are getting stressful or tenuous, but the color palette stays pretty much the same. Those are two conflicting like psychological aspects to like filming in color and shots and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely.
There's certainly a deeper meaning to the plot.
This fucking asshole.
Oh, this scene is great. We definitely have to get into this scene because there's a reason he does this, which we'll get into. So yeah, I give this movie a 5 out of 5. Yorgos Lanthimos is probably one of my favorite directors right now. He is just like absolutely killing everything he does.
There's a lot of slapping in this movie, actually.
Yeah, there is. So the first movie I saw of his was Killing of a Sacred Deer, another Colin Farrell movie.
Yeah, I didn't know that existed. I saw that like when we looked this up, I saw that and I was like, oh.
I highly recommended it. I highly recommend it. So that was my first introduction to him. We were actually at one of the premieres for the movie. And so I started looking up all of his other work, and he does some great stuff. He did 2018's The Favorite, which got a bunch of Oscar nominations, and even this movie had a lot of attention. So this movie came out in 2015. It was nominated for Best Original Screenplay at the Academy Awards and lost to Manchester by the Sea. I don't know if you've seen that, Zach.
I haven't.
That's a pretty good one. In retrospect, I think it's a little overrated.
It's weird to me that this one to me had a lot of. It reminds me because especially when I found out the country of origin of this movie, like it reminded me of a lot of like the dry wit you see in European comedies.
Definitely.
Comedies. So like that's where I thought that's where like, people, because someone who doesn't know that could probably be like, oh, you can't laugh at that, that's not funny. I'm like, no, it's the subtle things like an eyebrow movement or literally the lack of reaction to things that makes this hilarious.
Yeah, Yeah, they definitely crank the absurdism to 11 in his work. But it also won a British Independent Film Award for Olivia Colman's performance. It had 3 Cannes Film Festival wins.
Nice.
And Colin Farrell got a Golden Globe nom for his performance. So we're going to go full into spoilers. So if you've not seen the movie, pause this podcast, go check it out. It's on Netflix. And then come back and chat with us about the Lobster. All right, let's get into it, Zach. Do you want to go over plot, or do you want to ask questions you have about the movie? How do you want to do it?
I'm going to start with what I talked about a little bit earlier, talking about the aesthetic themes and choices here. All of this is a lot of blue and accented blue. Like even in this room, blue and gold and the color wheel party together all the time. So even like the darker scenes like this, I didn't recognize or realize at first. And it's all still very calming. None of it's jarring. Even the scene where the heartless woman, and a lot of people in this movie don't have names, by the way, when she kills this dog, it's still a darker red with blue tones. Like even this is all warm and inviting, and really kind of helps mask like the sinister nature of like what's actually happening in this world and in this existence. And I think it's a great use of storytelling because it's a stark contrast to like what's actually happening.
Oh, definitely.
Like there's 3 different themes at once. It's supposed to be a comedy, but then you have scenes like this. Yeah. And then sorry, for those who are watching, go watch it. Now we're episode 17 here. Go watch it. Yeah, it's just so many things at once that like if you're not, I think for this one I had to have such an open mind, not because like I had a closed mind to it, but in order to catch everything, but I still think I missed a bunch. You have to like sit back and just let it wash over you like you're at the beach.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's certainly more colorful than you'd expect for a dystopian film, because at the end of the day, this is kind of a dystopian movie. It's still pretty desaturated in certain shots, like this one, for example. Some of the wood shots, like there's a scene. There's quite a few scenes with Rachel Weisz and Colin Farrell that are pretty desaturated, and I think that fits into the kind of droning, almost like boring aspect of this movie without it actually being boring. Like it's supposed to kind of lull you into this like sense of boredom, because the main premise of this movie, what they're talking about is like society has these standards. Like you're supposed to be married and you're supposed to be compatible in every single way, and if you don't, you make big changes so that this person that you claim to love will want to stay with you, and if it doesn't work out, you guys are gonna have kids because kids solve that issue.
That we laughed so hard.
Oh, me too.
When the director said that part.
Yeah, that was great. But that's kind of the premise of the movie, and if you decide to be single, you're an animal. Because life life is about companionship, and that's kind of what this movie is about. So yeah, maybe we go over the plot in general, and then we can kind of dive into some of our favorite scenes.
Okay.
Did you have other plans?
No, I was just thinking like recapping the plot. There's a lot of plot. Like, I'm curious to see how you would recap this, actually, because I feel like I couldn't contain it without just telling all of the movie, because there's so much to this movie.
There's a ton, yeah. Well, I'll go kind of quick and over general stuff, and if there's a scene of importance that you want to dive into, we'll do that. So David the movie starts with this woman driving down the road. She sees 2 donkeys on the side of the highway, and she pulls over and shoots them. And then it cuts to our main character, Colin Farrell, who's David. He's like one of 2 actually named characters in the credits. And so it starts with his wife basically telling him that she's found another man, and he asks her if he's short-sighted, like he is. And that seems kind of like innocuous, but you learn more as you go on that there's a reason he asked that question. So he ends up at this hotel and checks in, and they ask him, for his information, and we learn pretty quickly. They don't really hide what happens at this hotel. You learn pretty immediately. You have 45 days to find a partner, or you're turned into an animal. So that I remember the first time watching that being, I didn't know anything going into the movie. I'm assuming you had the same experience.
Yeah, I can say that I only knew what I knew from the trailer, and it definitely looked interesting, just the concept. I really didn't understand like what it meant or what the movie would actually be.
Yeah, because it goes much deeper.
That look she has. Oh, she could just melt me like butter with that cold, motionless expression.
Is she on your hall pass?
No, dude, that's gross. I have a loving respect for how devious Fragile is. The anti-hero of Death Stranding. This is not a plug for Death Stranding, but go play Death Stranding.
Yeah, you should. I have not actually played it, and I don't know much about it other than the Monster Energy drinks. So they ask him pretty quickly, or they tell him pretty quickly, you have 45 days or you're going to get turned into an animal. What animal do you want to be? And he says a lobster. So that's where we get the name of the movie.
Also note that his brother was also at that hotel and he didn't make it, and he came with his brother who was turned into a collie.
Yes. So he's got a dog with him the whole time, and you learn pretty quickly that is his brother that is with him. So he did not find a lover and was turned into a dog.
You know, something I just realized too, when he asked his wife if the man she was seeing was nearsighted, that didn't click to me until right now, is that this whole society is based on, like you said, finding those small matches and like building a relationship off of it. Like, that means that he was well aware of this hotel, and this is a very common thing that happens in their society, and that's pretty wild. Absolutely. I just never thought about that.
Yeah, it's super crazy. And this was kind of one of the first scenes that struck out to me when he's checking in. They ask him if he is heterosexual or homosexual, and he mentions that he was married to a woman, but that he had a homosexual encounter in college, and he asks if there's a bi option, and the woman says, kind of just like passes it off as, no, it's not possible. It didn't work out in testing. So he has to pick. So he picks heterosexual. And I think that
was interesting to me, like, especially considering, my friends who are bi, how much, I would say, flack they get in a general stance. I was like, wow, it's in a movie that, like, you can't choose. Like, I don't know, that whole thing, like, kind of, they rubbed me the wrong way, but it was like, whoa, that's different. I
mean, it's intentional because in the premise of the film, it's putting kind of a mirror to society. It's not speaking ill of bi people, but it's saying, society views these people as not valid. I didn't think he meant they were speaking ill. It was just more so like seeing it that blatant. It was like you said, a mirror of society, and it was good to have that like contrast of like, yeah, there's no representation that needs to happen. That's more of what I meant. Like, to see it like that was actually like, whoa. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
This chick.
Yeah, that's a great.
Willingly knowing that they were humans at one point.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we learn as the film goes on. Olivia Colman is the director.
Oh. She only shot one of them.
Yeah, because they were lovers.
Yep.
Yeah. Which there's a whole discussion there about what happened there between the three of them. But we learned from Olivia Colman, who's the director of this, that all animals in society are basically people that did not find mates. And tells him that was, it was a good decision to pick a lobster. His reasoning being they live like 100 years. And they're they're fertile for their entire lives. He loves the water. So she mentions dogs and how everyone picks dogs, and that's why we have so many dogs, which is funny. So a big chunk of this movie is him trying to find a partner, and the two male friends that he makes while he's there, which I'm blanking on their names, but it's John C. Reilly's and Ben Wishaw's character, and it's all kind of them trying to find their partner and kind of the awkwardness of dating. And then it's juxtaposed with these scenes. There's a scene where Colin Farrell looks out his window and sees a bunch of bodies laying out in the driveway. And you learn that there are days where they all go out and hunt what they call loners, which are people that are out living in the wilderness, and if they bring them in, they get days added on to their time at the hotel. So there's this woman that Colin Farrell's got his eyes on early on. We learn that she's got like 100+ days banked up at this hotel, and so they start dating. And his behavior radically changes to match hers because he's so desperate to find somebody, obviously. So
yeah,
she's
he was on like day 2 at the end. He was towards the end of his and hadn't caught anybody or like.
Yeah, it moves along pretty quick. So within, the first 15 minutes, I think we go through the majority of his days at the hotel. And so his behavior radically changes. He's very cold. There's a scene where Ben Wishaw's character has found a partner, and we learn that the partner he's with has bad nosebleeds. So he starts to fake having nosebleeds so that they'll be a good match. So he's the first one of the three to get a partner, and pretty early on you see him with a kid, and that's after we've learned that when couples are going through hard times, they add a child to the mix. But Colin Farrell just straight up like kicks the kid when he's introduced, which it's very absurdist and kind of surreal because you would never expect that to happen. But there's a reasoning for it. He's trying to be cold like this woman that he's dating, and one morning he wakes up to find that she killed his brother, and he goes to the bathroom, and he's trying to hide his emotions because she will report him to the hotel that he is not who he's portraying.
I will say that like the sequence leading up to her finding that out about him was actually quite brilliant, because I know, but when he was golfing, so there's single activities and there's couples only activities, and you can't like do either unless you're a couple or you're single. And when Colin Farrell, I think, was on his last or his end of days, or wow, not end of days, but towards the end of his time at the hotel, he decided that it was easier to fake emotions than it is to try and produce them that he didn't have. Because before, he was unsuccessful in trying to connect with other people who like didn't feel how he was feeling, and he just thought it was easier to like hide how he felt. Because he got people who coming after him, and he tried collecting the people also. It just didn't really work out. And I think the scenes like in the beginning when they're having sex, it's just like very cold and like heartless between the two of them. But after a while, he starts to get into it, and the person who's with is like, wait a minute, what the hell is this? And so he like wakes up to her having killed his dog because she's trying to test his emotions, like you said. But I think how they like she started putting that together was kind of a crazy sequence of things where you could see her getting gradually more pissed off. Because I don't think she thought she was going to kill him first. I didn't think she was going to try and break up with him.
Yeah, I would not put it past her because their first interaction where she like fakes choking in the hot tub and he just sits there and watches her do it. I was like, wow, this is.
I was like, that's
she seems intense.
Yeah, he knew. Yeah, she fakes choking on an olive, and then she goes, "I think we're a match."
Yeah,
I agree. Like, what is happening?
Yeah, so she takes him. She tries to take him down to the hotel manager, and there is a maid at the hotel that's kind of sympathetic to the whole. This whole idea that this whole thing is not right. This is not the way to do things. So they sedate her, and she allows him to escape. And he ends up in the woods where they do all their hunting. And he joins up with a group of singles. And that's where we meet Rachel Weisz's character. And we do not get a name for her. But the rule is that they're not allowed to have any relationships in the woods, that they're just trying to survive, and there's to be no relationships. So this group is led by Léa Seydoux, who is absolutely wonderful in this role. She's fantastic. But they start getting these kind of contracts where they're going into the city. And they're trying to kind of take down the hotel as a whole. And as this goes on, Colin Farrell develops a relationship with Rachel Weisz's character because they're both nearsighted. Léa Seydoux's character, one day they're in the city and Léa Seydoux says, "Hey, I've got this doctor's appointment for you. We're going to get your nearsightedness fixed." And she actually has the doctor blind her, which that scene was absolutely crazy when you find that out.
Oh, I know, that was super fucked.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane. And the reason she does this is she finds out that David and her have been having a secret relationship.
Right, and that's like strictly forbidden. So it's, in a way, it's a stark contrast to the hotel where the goal was to get people mated up and paired off. The loners they want to break up that society, but they also won't allow fraternization. So it's a very like damned if you do, damned if you don't type situation, honestly.
Yeah, right. And there's an interview actually with Rachel Weisz. She's talking about the movie, and she says kind of, the idea of the movie is you fight against this one viewpoint and you end up kind of creating your own cult, which is kind of what happens here. Is he's so anti what this society has kind of built that he's created kind of a polar opposite extremist viewpoint.
That look she gets, that's when I knew that they were fucked. Oh, that one. Yeah, right there. Yeah. Oh, they were fucked. Oh, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, audience. Great. But when she looks over in between them and she's like, you can see her reading their movements and their emotions. Oh, they are so that look. Oh,
yeah. The assumption is that Léa Seydoux's character is bisexual and has feelings for both of them. Kind of the glances that she gives them. Actually, she gives them these kind of like side glances. I think a lot of people assume that she blinded Rachel Weisz's character because she had feelings for David. But a lot of people see it as her being bisexual, and that's kind of why she's the leader of the loners, because she doesn't really belong in society.
That's literally not anywhere near where I took that.
Oh, really? Why did you think she did it? Just because they didn't want fraternizing? Because she's a cult leader and
has rules.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fair, and I think that is a valid theory.
Like she straight up said, "Don't do it."
Yeah,
and they're doing it. Yeah. So she's like, "Cool." Well, not only that, but like it also seems that because she's a loner and very proud of that, the inability to like want to lose any of her flock to want to return to that life after feeling that she raised and protected them with her ideologies. Sounded like she felt betrayed, so she decided to do what she knows how to do: make people depend on her and destroy the reliance on each other. Because even though she didn't want people like fucking, she still desired it. You know?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So in a way, it's like, if I can't be happy, why should you? I run this. You're all my children. You're going to die when you die, but also when I say you die. You know, she's a hotel manager with red hair.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. Yeah. Of the opposite viewpoint.
Yeah. I never once thought of like it being about her sexuality, though. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's just another theory. I think your theory is just as valid, and I
see. Okay.
I 100% agree with you.
Okay,
these are just theories.
So like, okay, I was like, whoa, that's I missed that.
No,
entirely.
It's very subtle. She gives some like loving glances to both of them in certain scenes. So
Gotcha.
Some people assume that.
I didn't see any of those glances.
So anyways, they and there's a funny scene that I forgot to mention. I wanted to mention it's early on when David joins the Loners. His buddy John C. Reilly, the lisping man, finds him in his hunt, and they start talking, and he asks him if he mentions that. David mentions that the lisping man is his best friend, and he goes, "Well, what about the limping man, John, who's Ben Wishaw's character? I thought you guys were best friends. You spent so much time together." And he just kind of goes, "Who?" And he just like acts like he doesn't even know. He's like, "Oh, I've completely forgotten who he was. No, we're best friends." And then he kind of thinks he's convinced him to let him go, and then John. Or Robert says, "Yeah, I'm gonna have to shoot you. I have to. I have 1 day left." And David just completely flips and says, "You really think 1 more day is gonna do anything for you? You're so ugly." Like,
that whole thing. Like the delivery is so dry that like you have to actually pay attention to the words. Like, wow, this dude just went complete 180.
Yeah, well, and that further kind of asserts like, if you're ugly, you're never going to find a lover, and you're going to be kind of like banished by society because like appearances are so important. So it just furthers kind of what the message of this film is. But kind of back to the story. So Rachel Weisz admits there's a great scene where Rachel Weisz is sitting by the tree and she hasn't told David that she's blind yet. He comes by and he says, "I've brought you a gift," and he puts the gift in her hand, and she had mentioned in the past how much she loves rabbits. So since she's blind, she doesn't know what it is, and she just assumes it's a rabbit. And she says, "It looks delicious." And he's like, "No, it's a flashlight. I got you a flashlight. You mentioned that you didn't want a flashlight." She's like, "All right, I've been lying to you. I'm blind." Yeah. I just thought that scene was so funny. But so they
Cards Against Humanity, actually.
Yeah, that would be a great Cards Against Humanity. So that was kind of their thing, was the nearsightedness. That was their bond. And now that she's blind, they don't really have that connection. So he spends some time trying to, teach her what things are by putting things in her hands. Like there's the scene with the cup. He hands her a cup and she tells him what it is. And, but you realize pretty quickly that he's completely lost interest in her.
Yeah.
So they end up escaping the cult, and they end up at this restaurant, and he grabs a knife and says, "Hey, I'm gonna make myself blind too," basically is what he says. So that they kind of have this shared thing. And so he goes to the bathroom, and you see him kind of messing with the knife and putting it towards his eye, trying to blind himself. And then it cuts to Rachel Weisz in the restaurant, sitting there, and then it cuts to black. So that's it. We don't get an explicit answer that he decided to blind himself to be together, or if he chickened out and just went out into the diner and said, "Yeah, I blinded myself," because how is she going to know? She's blind. So what is your assumption, Zach? Do you think he did it?
He bailed.
You think he bailed?
Yep.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. There's a lot of hesitance in the scene. Rightfully so. I mean, even if you do go through with it, blinding yourself is no fun task.
Well, plus he had a couple of reasons why I think he bailed. And I actually went back and watched the ending like 4 times because I wanted to see it in that last scene. Because you know how movies like this like to get people to focus on the subject and not in the focus on the foreground, not the background.
Yeah.
I was watching to see if maybe somewhere the director had Colin's character like disappear in that open scene with like all the movement back there in construction. And I literally sat in like 4 inches from my TV and watched. Didn't see anything. I was like, okay, cool. He didn't make him sneak out the back somewhere. But the reason why I think he bailed are a couple of things. One, when you look at the society as a whole, couples are based on their similarities, no matter how big or how small, even from random fake nosebleeds or, nearsightedness. I think in the end, when he said, oh, like, I want to like remember parts of you, so show me these things before like I go and blind myself. I think that was his way of actually saying goodbye. And I don't think he intended to really leave her, but I do think that the way their society was, I mean, he was probably like, what would you put him like mid-40s in this movie as far as like his character's age?
Yeah, I think it's assumed he's older.
So 40 years working and living in this environment and the indoctrination that comes with that, he could probably reason, I got her dressed up, clean, and safe away from the woods where I know she can be taken advantage of or possibly killed because I killed the leader of the loners. Oh, by the way, he does that.
TLDR. Yeah. Yeah. Forgot to mention that.
And, he got her in the city where she's safe and someone can take care of her. And he can kind of just continue on with what he's doing. Another thing that I can use to reinforce that is that he did that twice earlier on in the movie when he tried to connect with other people, and his character changed entirely to when he was with the Heartless woman. And he was able to switch back and go, okay, cool, well, I'm out. And realistically, what they had was just the short-sightedness. So if he just found someone else who was short-sighted or, had brown hair or loved staring blankly at a TV screen and making a lot of money from it, he could have definitely like cleaned up, And I think the third point I have is why I think it's the fact that he left is I think she's retelling the story to somebody else after he left her at the booth, because the narration, I believe, stops right around the time she's blinded. So I think that's when the story catches up, and it's no longer because it cuts from his story and becomes their story. And I think towards the end, it becomes her story of how like she got to where she is now.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory, because throughout the movie, I don't think we mentioned this, throughout the movie, she kind of narrates things and it's kind of assumed to be her journal, which is how Léa Seydoux's character finds out about their relationship, is through her journal. Yep. I definitely think that this is more of her story than people assume, given that she is the narrator, and given that she kind of gets the last scene. It's about her. So the big theory online, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. So after the credits roll, if you stick around for the credits, it's a black screen and there's just sound of the ocean waves. So the biggest assumption is that you're right, he did leave her, but he ended up turning himself into the lobster and going to the ocean, which I kind of like that theory. I
didn't hear that. How long into the credits did you wait? Because like Netflix, I just let it do the regular like 25-second timeout thing.
I think it's after, so I think you have to sit all the way through.
Gotcha. That was my bad.
Yeah. And there was another interesting thing I read about. I don't know if it's true. It was just in Reddit theory thing. So I haven't confirmed whether this is true or not. But to make lobsters mate, they blind the lobster. So apparently lobsters won't mate unless they're can't see. I think they typically only do it at night. So I think a lot of fishermen or farmers for lobsters, they blind the lobster so that they'll mate, which is kind of an interesting. Maybe that's why they decided to go with that animal for this movie. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
That's one hell of a set of beer goggles there.
Yeah, for real. Taking it to the extreme.
Could you imagine?
I'm just gonna blind myself so I can get laid.
Song. If I have one more drink, I'm gonna end up you. That's what I'm gonna do, shawty. So if you're a lobster, if we swim in this tank, I'm gonna end up blinding you. That's what I'm gonna do. That's fuck, dude.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not an expert on lobsters.
I wonder how many covers I can do in this podcast to be featured on Rock and Roller Podcast next top best covers.
Oh my gosh, yeah. If you have not listened to that podcast, check them out. We will link them in the description of the podcast. They're great. And I have to say that intro still, it's amazing. That was the perfect intro for this podcast. You took the lyrics from the song and then took the melody from the movie, and they just blended so perfectly. So yeah, is there any other thoughts you have on this movie, Zach?
Honestly, it's definitely one I recommend. I don't. Again, I have to rescind. I rescind myself. I rescind myself before the council. I will put back on that 0.3 it took off and give it a 5 out of 5 because It's a great experience.
I'm glad you really enjoyed it, Zach.
I did. It's just one of those. It's just a crazy ass movie. I didn't know what to expect the entire damn time, and I like stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. I think if that's the parts you like about it, then you are gonna love this. So this, if you're watching the video, I'm showing the trailer for The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which was his follow up to The Lobster. It's Colin Farrell, and it is just, if not more so, crazy. Nicole Kidman is wonderful in this movie, and it introduced me to probably one of my favorite young actors right now. I think his name's Barry Keoghan. He's Irish, I think.
He looks super familiar. What else has he been in since this movie came out?
Recently, which is one of my favorite TV shows, he was in Chernobyl for 2 episodes, if you've seen that, the HBO series.
I haven't, but he looks familiar from some... he looks familiar from something else.
He was also in Dunkirk, which is a great movie.
That may have been it.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. And he's going to be in the Eternals movie.
Okay.
So yeah, I think you'd really like that. This was his most recent film, The Favorite, which also had Rachel Weisz and Olivia Colman. He's one of those directors that has these actors that he loves, and he keeps putting them in his movies, kind of like Tarantino.
Those are both great actresses.
Oh yeah, Olivia Colman is unbelievable. If you haven't seen Fleabag on Amazon Prime, she is amazing in it.
Good to know.
Yeah, so this movie, The Favorite, has Emma Stone in it, and it's a period piece. It's a black comedy, just like most of his films. It's 18th century Great Britain. And it kind of has some truth to it. So, but it's a kind of a romantic film. Very good though, and I highly recommend it. So, yeah, that was Media Club. I'm really glad you liked it, Zach. I hope everyone that may have watched it with us enjoyed it. Let us know what you think. Hit us up on Instagram at This Pod Is For Nerds. Twitter at thispodis4nerds, or at thispodisfornerds@gmail.com. Zach, what are we watching in 2 weeks? Or doing? I don't know. We're not necessarily watching something.
This was an interesting one. I actually So Media Club, as per its inception, we have to find ways. See, you have a style, Calvin, with the things that you recommend. And so I was kind of racking my brain on this one, trying to figure out what can I send to Calvin? What can I get him to watch? What can I do to my friend Calvin here?
I'm open to anything.
Oh, don't I know it, buddy? I don't know that for a fact, actually. Yes, I do. I know for a fact. So, okay, this one was a little tricky because I was trying to figure out like the themes we've had recently and maybe what I could do to either continue the theme or kind of throw it up, or do I want to go a little bit with like, hey, we want some stark contrast now. We want to go back. Maybe it's something we've already seen, maybe something we love, something we watched. I'm going to take it back because I love watching things that are stylistic, and we have a lot of style, like with Burning and with this movie, obviously The Lobster and Parasite. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to give you a throwback this time around, and I want you to compare themes not so much as far as the storytelling. Well, no, sorry. Compare themes. Storytelling, yes. But how is the story told? Because I feel like this particular movie, even though it has a lot more blood in it, even though it's a little more violent, the storytelling has a lot of interesting setups and use of color and sound and soundtrack that I think is always worth revisiting. Calvin, on Media Club, and it's funny you said his name earlier in the podcast as well. So you set me up for this because
awesome. Yeah.
We will be watching Kill Bill Volume 1.
Oh, yes. I'm so excited. I have not watched it in probably 10 years.
Yeah, it's about 10 years for me as well.
I think it's been like 10 years, yeah. Because it was like right before I met my now wife, I think, was probably the last time I watched it.
I don't even think I've watched it with my wife.
I don't think I have either, and it's one of her favorite movies. So I'm gonna have to get her to watch it with me, and I'll grab her thoughts too.
Yeah,
because Tarantino's obviously one of the best directors, and Kill Bill is arguably one of his best works. So
I love the use. Oh, psych! I can't tell you what I love from that movie. That's for the next Media Club. So we'll catch you on that next time on This Podcast Is for Nerds.